Tonight on America First, another fiery rally from former President Trump in Sarasota, Florida this weekend. In case you missed it, Newsmax, the only major cable news network to cover Saturday's rally in its entirety, again. And you can go back and watch it on our social media platforms as well if you missed it. It was a good one. Our own Heather Childers interviewed the former president just moments before he took the stage, asked him about the importance of endorsing America First candidates for Congress, for Senate. Take a listen.
People are out there dancing, waiting for you to show up. How important is it for the candidates that you endorse to be America First candidates, and what does that mean to you?
Well, it really means everything. It's about America First. We sold our country out over the last 25, 30 years, and even before that. And we're America First. We have to take care of our country.
All right, let's bring in former Trump legal team member Jenna Ellis to talk about this. Jenna, good to see you.
Great to see you too, Rob.
So Trump's second rally since leaving the White House, he spoke about preserving the legacy of July 4th, founding fathers, and motivating Republicans to take back Congress in the face of a mess, especially at the border that's been caused by this administration. Let's take a listen.
They took names off buildings like George Washington. And I told you, this is where they're coming from. We're not going to let that happen. They will never be purged from history or canceled from our hearts. We're going to elect a Republican Congress to terminate Joe Biden's open border catastrophe, defund his extreme agenda, and give our ICE and Border Patrol the resources support.
So the president also released a statement today saying we'll never save your country or be great again unless Republicans get tough and get smart. Get tough and get smart. What does he mean by that, Jenna?
Well, I think the president is very focused on 2022 and 2024, and he's saying that we need to make sure that we continue to fight for our country. And one of the things that I love and respect the most about President Trump is that he is not backing down, and he is continuing to be the tip of the spear to encourage all Americans to get out and vote, and to also make sure that we have candidates that are actually going to do their job in Congress. They're not going to be these weak rhinos, and he is going to make sure to endorse candidates that are going to be tough and smart when they get in office in 2022. And I think that the Republicans and all conservatives need to focus on winning back the House and the Senate in 2022, and that's what President Trump is focused on, America First.
Absolutely. Win the House back, and let's get some padding in there as well. He also put out this statement on Saturday. He's expected to make a major announcement about his efforts to protect First Amendment rights. That'll happen in Bedminster, New Jersey on Wednesday. He's going to be joined by Linda McCann, I should say, and Brooke Rollins from the America First Policy Institute. Any indications what this is going to be about?
I'm so excited. So I just spoke with Liz Harrington, the President Trump spokesperson, over the weekend. And she said that, of course, obviously, we can't get ahead of the president, but she said in her words, it's going to be huge. And so, again, President Trump has fought for freedom of speech against censorship, and he has been the tip of the spear in this fight. So I'm really excited for his announcement. And I think that he's doing, obviously, much more than the current sitting installed president to actually fight for the agenda that Americans truly care about.
Any rallies, any more rallies coming up? Do we know?
Not yet, none that have been announced, but
Okay.
definitely make sure to get on that list. And of course, Newsmax will be there, I'm sure, to cover in the next ones. And I know that he has those planned, and we'll get that on the schedule.
Sure. Did you hear anything about these numbers? We're hearing these unofficial numbers from Sarasota at like 45,000 was
I heard that
tried to get in, and we can't verify that. We haven't yet, anyways. If that is true, what does that tell you about the steam behind the movement?
Well, the MAGA movement is still running strong, and President Trump is clearly front and center of the Republican Party. And so, again, people like Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, all of these rhinos that didn't support and aren't supporting President Trump need to get on board or get out of the way, because conservatives know that America First policy is winning policy. If we look at the contrast between President Trump's first few months in office compared to the disaster that Joe Biden has been, when they're having to tout 16 cents that you're saving on your July 4th barbecue as like his greatest accomplishment. That's really sad. At this point in President Trump's administration, he had already sat a Supreme Court justice. He was well on his way to economic recovery. I mean, there were so many things that he did just in his first few months, and we need to get back to those policies.
And let's not forget, he had the media trying to destroy him every single day, as opposed to a media that is trying as hard as they can to make him look good, which is what President Biden has. Speaking of which, another gaffe from Biden during his visit to Michigan. He went to a pie shop this weekend, caught off guard, asked about the Russians and that big cyber attack that hit 200 U.S. companies over the weekend. He got a little bit caught up. Let's take a listen.
I'll be in better shape to talk to you about it. Hang on a second. I'll tell you what they sent me. Okay. The idea, first of all, we're not sure who it is for certain.
I mean, I don't like picking on him. He's an old man. I really don't. I'm not comfortable with that. But he's the president. I mean, it's a very simple question. It's a huge story. The guy's running the country, and he's the most powerful man in the world. I mean, that's really scary.
It really is. When the president of the United States gets caught off guard with a very simple question at a pie shop, this is really embarrassing. And I've been saying for a while now that the majority of Americans know that Joe Biden is not in his right mind and he's not leading the country. And now the numbers actually back that up, Rob, because just today, the Convention of States Project, in connection with the Trafalgar Group, which was one of the most accurate pollsters in 2016, released a survey today where they polled the likely voters for 2022, and almost 57% of the likely voters, including 31% of Democrats, do not believe that Joe Biden is executing the duties of his office. They think someone else is in charge. We know that. The Democrats know that. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting number. I didn't know that number. Jenna Ellis, thanks for giving us that. Thanks for talking to us tonight. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Rob, and happy Independence Day.
Same to you as well. Absolutely. Coming up, former President Trump had some harsh words for supporters of critical race theory over the weekend.
The poisonous left-wing doc is flagrant racism. It's plain and simple. It's pure, plain racism. And in place of old-fashioned love of America, the Biden administration has new rules pushing hateful Marxist critical race theory into our children's schools and into our military. The poisonous left-wing doc is flagrant racism. It's plain and simple. It's pure, plain racism.
President Trump on Saturday issuing a strong warning against the dangers of critical race theory. Critics warn that while CRT is positioned as an anti-racist curriculum, of course, its emphasis on race will make kids more racist because everything's about race. One such critic is our next guest, who resigned his post as site coordinator for the Manchester School District in the state of New Hampshire in response to their embrace of CRT and white privilege training. Daniel Concannon joins us now to talk about this further. Sir, thank you so much for the time. We'll start with this. You issued a scathing letter to your former employer where you say your reasons for resigning are in light of their, quote, endorsement of the dehumanization and hatred of white people as evidenced by their dissemination of the imbecilic, good word there, white privilege curriculum. You also describe yourself as a trans feminine, spectrosexual, non-libidoist Subaru Forester Basset Hound hybrid with a mixtape of surgical errors for genitals. And you're obviously a pretty funny guy. I like all that. Tell me more about, just lay it out for me. What happened here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real disaster down there, but we'll skip right past that. Yeah. The bottom line is critical race theory, whatever name you want to call it, the white privilege training, all of this nonsense.
Yeah.
It is plainly anti-white. These things are all part of a dehumanization campaign against white people. And to me, first and foremost, we have to address it as what it is, as anti-white. We can't obfuscate that. It's on its face clear what it is.
Sure.
And if we can't call it what it is, we can't fight it.
You quit your job over this. Tell me what you said, site coordinator, right? Manchester School District. Tell me what you did and why you felt the need to just straight up quit.
Well, so earlier on, I had filed a formal HR complaint. I went through the rinky-dink process that these glorified pencil pushers put you through. They don't care. They don't want to do anything. They want to push this garbage out. They approve of it all. Ultimately, they stood by it. Well, I don't stand by hating myself. I don't stand by being forced into learning how to hate myself. Mm-hmm. I was left with no choice. I was going to do something. I'm not going to take this garbage from these unremarkable people. So I wrote my letter of resignation. I sent it their way. And I am very happy that this has shed a light on the issue and put pressure on these absolute zilches that sit on the board of school and that run our school district.
What do you say to people out there, white people that say, you know what, we deserve this. This is a racist country. I am a problem, and I should just accept these lashings in public?
They've been pushed into a corner. They've been born into a world that robs them of their own identity. Yeah. They don't know who they are. It's very, very scary. Now, they need to learn how to fight their way out of that corner. We have to learn to reject this pathologizing of so-called whiteness. These people are pathological pathologizers. And when you stick up for yourself, that's your own new mental disorder for not hating yourself. These people have been infected by that mind virus, convinced to hate themselves, and it's a very ugly thing.
Certainly is. You got to be one of the most interesting people I've ever talked to on this show, and we appreciate you coming on, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for fighting this thing, because it's ugly, and you know it better than anybody. Take care of yourself.
You too.
All right. Coming up, a CNN duo, a CNN duo giddy over a proposed new gun law in California. Vaughn, go somewhere else. You can see the frustration there. And he's got a lot on the line saying that. I mean, that takes some cojones, let's be honest. That's a big statement from him. It's impressive and very well said. Former President Trump this past weekend in Sarasota, Florida, at a packed rally of thousands of people who endured the oppressive Florida heat this time of the year and then the rain. Here's the president, former president.
The mission for all of us here tonight is to preserve the legacy of July 4th, 1776, and to defend our liberty from the radical left movement that seeks to cancel this date, demolish our heritage, and destroy our beloved nation.
There you go. We're hearing estimates, potentially 45,000 people went to that rally. Think about what that means. Where's the energy right now? 45,000. That's the estimate. It's not confirmed, but that's the estimates we're getting. Try to go to that rally. Biden might get 4 or 5. Joining me now is Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson to talk about all this stuff. Sir, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Thanks for covering it.
Absolutely. You're a former Army Ranger, and thank you so much for your service. How upsetting is all of this hate we're seeing from within our country? People that are elected members of Congress.
Look, I enlisted in the Army, and I got sent over to Germany when the Berlin Wall was up, got to be over there when it came down, and then I got the chance to go to West Point. And if my personal story ended at you got to go to West Point, you'd say, God bless America. What an amazing country. Lots of places that could never happen. Mm-hmm. But I point out one of my colleagues who came to America legally, born in Mogadishu, Somalia in 1982. If you think there's anybody who would be thankful for America, you would think it would be my colleague, Ilhan Omar. She came here because Americans went to Somalia, brought her and her family to America, and in one generation, she's a member of Congress. But the narrative's totally different. You can't succeed if you're an immigrant. You can't succeed if you're a minority, if you're a woman. Yeah. She's a racial, ethnic, and religious minority. She's a member of Congress, not to mention some of the others who've had some really offensive comments about our country.
It is mind-blowing. I mean, when you have Cori Bush, who's elected to national public office, saying that black people in this country aren't free. I mean, how did she expect you not to laugh at that? I mean, how do you even say that with a straight face? And it's amazing because so many people will actually buy that line.
You know, it's tragic that there was a period of time when that wasn't the case, when there was the fugitive slave laws and things like that. And look, acknowledging our history is fine, but this country gave birth to those beautiful ideas. And by the grace of God, we've made this a more perfect union because so many before us have fought, bled, and died to make this, really the land of opportunity. People come here legally from all over the world and sadly illegally from all over the world. They're not fleeing this country, they're pouring in. And yet from the rhetoric, you would think from our own countrymen, some of my own colleagues in Congress, that this is some oppressive, horrible place. The reality is there's nothing like it in the world in the history of man. No. God bless America.
And these people are so angry about it, they want to destroy this just to make some kind of a point and try something that's tried and failed countless times already. Some of the members of the U.S. women's national soccer team today appeared to
most Americans. Look, this guy is the epitome of the greatest generation. So much of the world knows freedom because he and his fellow Americans went and helped make not just America free, but the world free from an oppressive regime. And when you look at the lack of respect, not just for our country, but for him, who's there playing our national anthem. Look, if you don't respect America, look, we can disagree, but if you don't at least respect America, don't represent America.
Fair enough. Well said. In Los Angeles on Saturday, our reporter James Kluge captured footage of a brawl between right-wing protesters and Antifa. And this is outside of a spa where a transgender customer exposed his male genitalia to kids. I mean, obviously, this is a very bizarre story. It's got a lot of anger on both sides, but it's even more bizarre to see people you would think are trying to defend the behavior of a transgender customer who shows his genitals to a kid. I mean, have you seen any of this? Even our own reporter James Kluge was assaulted in this thing.
Yeah, I've seen some of the coverage, and look, this is why free press needs to be out there. There are training camps all over the country training these folks. They're trying to define themselves as Antifa. It's just an idea, of course, according to our president, but they're really activists. They're going out there, and you can't naturally think this way. Look at the people I just highlighted. You have to be trained that way. So there are training grounds all over our country and, frankly, on many of our campuses. And these are being funded with our tax dollars. It's not just the amount of money that we're spending. It's what our country's spending it on and literally training young people to think and old to think this way, to fundamentally remake America, which was Barack Obama's stated goal. You have to tear it down. And that's what critical theory does in every way possible. It tears down our country. And we just have to recognize they do not share the same goals that we do and that our founders did and that so many generations in the past have. They've been trained to turn against our country so that they can fundamentally remake it into this, their version of some sort of utopia. But it's hostile to the founding ideas, to our United States Constitution.
It is crazy. It's crazy that the Marxists never, ever, they don't read the books. They don't read the history books. They can't admit a failed idea. They just can't admit it. The largest teachers union, speaking of which, in the country, just passed a resolution saying it's appropriate to include critical theory in our curriculum. That's got to be really scary for a lot of parents watching. Do you think are our kids doomed by this? If this is this mainstream now, where these major unions, we've got a political party embracing this, we've got major teachers unions embracing this, how do you save your kids?
We can't cede the ground. This is why the 1776 project that Donald Trump started to kick off is so important. We can't just abandon public education to the left. In the meantime, obviously, you have to protect your kids. I mean, I'm a parent. My kids are out of, their college age or graduated at this point. But, we have to protect our kids. That's the first duty of a parent. But in the meantime, as a country, we cannot abandon public education to watch people train our kids, train the next generation to hate America. We have to do something like the 1776 project. And if we can't get the win at the federal level, that's why the states need to provide an umbrella of protection so that we train people the right way and educate them on our country's history and legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do think that with all of this, the suburbs are so critically important in elections. We've got an election coming up in a little more than a year. They are going to really regret this decision, pushing all this, because you're going to really inspire a lot of people to get out there and vote like hell to stop this from happening, as what they're seeing happening in their schools. Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson, sir, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Rob.
All right.
4th of July isn't just about fireworks and cookouts, of course. It commemorates the birth of a new nation, a country founded on powerful and unique principles that would eventually spread across the globe, shaping the future. But the narrative in 2021 is that America's birth was tarnished by slavery. And if you listen to the New York Times, it's not even the true founding. It was in 1619 when the first African slaves arrived in Virginia. Yesterday, radical leftist Congresswoman Maxine Waters went so far as to actually call July 4th a white man's holiday, a spiteful slap in the face to every American, regardless of color. Abraham Lincoln once warned against that kind of division. In an 1858 speech, Lincoln called the spirit of 1776, quote, the electric cord that links the hearts of patriotic and liberty-loving men throughout the world. Lincoln believed July 4th should always be the tie that binds. But the left seems hell-bent on pulling us apart. It begs the question, is America losing its love of freedom? Joining us now is the author of Old Abe, a novel, John Cribb. John, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much, Jen. Thank you much, Steve. Thanks for having me. And happy Independence Day weekend.
Happy Independence Day weekend to you as well. I think it should be Independence Day month. We need more celebration of America. I want to ask you, you take a look at how the 4th was celebrated this year. You see the way things are in America. Vanessa Williams at PBS's Capitol 4th event, she said she's singing what she calls the Black National Anthem. What are your thoughts when you see where things are now? And what do you think Abe would say about all this?
Yeah, well, it worries me. I don't know if you saw the report that came out of the National Archives recently, which is, that temple of freedom where we keep and preserve our founding documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And they had a task force on racism, and it said even the rotunda there, which is where thousands of Americans come every year to see their founding documents, they called it an example of structural racism. So if this line of thinking wins to the day, I'm afraid that we're in trouble. And I know that Abraham Lincoln would take a dim view of this because he was an ardent admirer and defender of the founders and a lover of the Declaration of Independence.
John, speaking of Abraham Lincoln, whom you write about, I think in some ways it's correct to actually call him the second founding father of the country. And what I mean by that is that the original founding fathers, let's face it, as magnificent a group of men as they were, they punted on the issue of slavery. And maybe they had to punt to get the new country to agree to a constitution. But the point is they did. And they punted largely to the 16th president who finally, and it took a brutal war for this country, but who finally made it right. So do you think it's fair to in some ways say he is the second founding father of America?
I do, and a lot of times he is put in the group of the founders, even though he came so much later, of course. And you're exactly right. And Lincoln defended the founders on that point, and he pointed out and argued that the founders they did not like slavery one bit. For example, Thomas Jefferson, in an early draft of the Declaration, called it a cruel war on human nature. But Lincoln argued that the founders believed that they simply could not break away from England, fight and win a war against one of the greatest military powers on earth, launch a new nation, hold 13 very different states together, and abolish slavery all at once. It was simply too great a task, he said. But what they could and what they did do is lay down some shining principles in the Declaration of Independence and the other founding documents that spelled out the doom of slavery. And that was a magnificent step forward at that time. Remember, at that time, the vast majority of the people in the world lived with very little or no freedom. And most people in history had lived with little to no freedom. But they laid down those principles, and that's what the Civil War turned out to be in the end, as you say. It was a fight to redeem that promise to future generations that everybody would be free and live in a self-governing country. And those principles that the founders laid down as promises to future generations have been beacons that have led the country forward generation after generation, sometimes in a halting fashion. but ever forward toward a more perfect union.
Well, John Cribb, thank you again for joining us tonight. And again, happy Independence Day weekend, as you put it.
Same to you. Thanks for having me.
Battle over critical race theory is not only being fought in school board meetings, it's being taken to the courtroom. Stacey DeMar, an Illinois drama teacher, has filed a federal lawsuit against her school district, charging that its critical race theory training is violating the U.S. Constitution and the Civil Rights Act. In court documents, DeMar charges that the district's race-based training required teachers to accept that white individuals are, quote, loud, authoritative, and controlling. To understand, to be less white is to be less racially oppressive, to acknowledge that, quote, white identity is inherently racist, and to denounce their, quote, white privilege. We hear that all the time. Well, the lawsuit even included some of the CRT curriculum for pre-K through 8th grade students. Quote, whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it. White people have a very, very serious problem, and they should start thinking what they should do about it. Joining us now is Kimberly Herman, General Counsel at the Southeastern Legal Foundation, which is representing Stacey DeMar in her lawsuit. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. You know, I was curious when I read about this story, I thought, okay, so she's a drama teacher. Usually you might hear about this with perhaps a social studies teacher. Can you tell us a little bit more about Ms. DeMar's unique situation?
Yeah, exactly. Taking, all of the information that you just explained that's in the lawsuit and kind of taking it to the next step. What's actually happening in District 65 in Evanston, Illinois, is that the school district is segregating the teachers and the students. And that was really the tipping point for Ms. DeMar. When you're in a mandatory training and you have the school separating teachers, putting the non-white teachers in one room and the white teachers in another, and then having the teachers do that with the students for lessons, that is a blatant violation of the 14th Amendment, blatant discrimination, and a violation of the Civil Rights Act. And so she actually filed a complaint with the Department of Education in 2019. And they went through an 18-month investigation, found that the district was violating the Civil Rights Act. And then several days after the Biden administration took office, they withdrew that finding.
You know, Kimberly, thank you for filing this suit, because I think it's just incredibly important. We have to fight on many fronts. School board meetings, we have to fight in Congress and state legislatures, but also in the courts, which is exactly what you're doing. Now, when I read this filing, I thought it was fascinating when I came across the quote, this ridiculous indoctrination training that is being thrust upon the teachers, that whites are loud, authoritative, and controlling. I immediately thought that whoever wrote that has never been to a Hispanic gathering with my family, because if they want to see loud, come on over. But kidding aside, all joking aside, don't you think that this kind of training, it's trying to force Americans into silos, into a tribalism, a country where we are balkanized and where we no longer coalesce on our Americanness and instead fixate on differences which in the scheme of things aren't that important?
Yes, and equality is the idea that, we are all equal. It is enshrined in the Constitution. What the district is doing here, to your point, is they are taking equality and they're replacing it with equity, right? And so when you look at that, they are using equity as a license to punish Americans because of their skin color. This is precisely why we had the civil rights movement in the first place. For the life of me, for the life of Ms. DeMar, for anyone that has come out to support, and there has been an overwhelming amount of support for her bringing this lawsuit, nobody can understand why they want to go back to this idea where we had to have the National Guardsmen coming in to enforce desegregation orders. And what the district is doing is separating its students, its teachers, and its parents by race. It is wrong. Sure. It is unconstitutional. It is illegal. And the court is going to declare that in this case.
Amen. We're not going to let them resegregate. And I love that you're using the Civil Rights Act as the legal lever. Kimberly Herman, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Patriots, it was a 4th of July to remember across the country, but we can't forget who to really thank for getting us back to normal. Up next.